In this podcast episode, host Shawn Ryan interviews 23-year-old independent journalist Nick Shirley, who gained national attention for exposing alleged large-scale fraud in Minnesota's taxpayer-funded daycare programs. The conversation spans Shirley's investigations into government waste, fentanyl addiction crises, immigration issues, and broader themes of media failure and political accountability. The episode also delves into Shirley's experiences traveling across the U.S. and internationally to document social and political problems firsthand, his clashes with legacy media, and his vision for activism and journalism moving forward. Nick Shirley explains how what started as an interest in the rise of Islam in Minnesota led him to uncover extensive fraud in the state's childcare program. A major turning point was connecting with a source named David, who provided detailed evidence about fraudulent daycare centers, many of which appeared to be empty buildings receiving millions in state and federal funds. Shirley describes visiting dozens of these centers in Minneapolis and revealing that buildings housed multiple daycare and healthcare businesses operating simultaneously, often with blacked-out windows, locked doors, and no children present. Over $9 billion was reported to be involved in this fraud over several years. The scheme reportedly benefited some Somali immigrant communities, with allegations that politicians like former Minnesota Governor Tim Walz either ignored or enabled the fraud. Walz even referred to organized crime being involved, but allegedly failed to notify authorities as legally required. Shirley's viral video on this issue amassed over 126 million views and prompted the governor to announce he would not seek re-election, marking a significant political fallout. Shirley emphasizes the rampant corruption and blatant waste of taxpayer dollars on fraudulent childcare programs and denounces the government's inability to hold perpetrators accountable effectively. Shirley discusses how traditional media outlets, from CNN to CBS, largely ignored or downplayed the fraud until his video exploded online. Instead of investigating the claims, many media organizations launched personal attacks against him, labeling him a MAGA YouTuber, right-wing influencer, or conspiracy theorist to discredit his work. Shirley believes these outlets felt threatened by his independent reporting style and the rapid spread of his content on modern platforms like X, formerly Twitter. Rather than engaging with the evidence, legacy media resorted to deflection and smear campaigns. The hostility extended to doxing his family and attempts to undermine his credibility. Nevertheless, Shirley maintains confidence in his investigative methods and states that exposing truth on his own terms, without needing bureaucratic approval, is a driver behind his success and ability to reach wide audiences. Much of Shirley's work also focuses on America's fentanyl epidemic. He recounts visiting cities like Philadelphia's Kensington and San Francisco, witnessing firsthand the devastating effects of addiction and homelessness. He paints a grim picture of addicts living amid overdoses, dead bodies on streets, and rampant drug use that deeply affects communities but receives little effective response from leadership. Shirley highlights the dramatic drop in fentanyl prices after the Biden administration opened border policies, drastically increasing the drug's availability. He shares personal experiences of being threatened and physically attacked while filming on the streets, but underscores the importance of hearing from marginalized individuals. Shirley tries to humanize addicts as somebody's son or daughter, with potential, lamenting lost lives and missed opportunities complicated by government failures to control the crisis. Shirley also touches on investigations in other states and countries. In California, especially Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, he exposes missing billions allocated for homelessness programs and describes the appalling living conditions for homeless populations. He discusses boofing kits in Maine, tools used for rectal fentanyl intake due to ruined veins, illustrating the depth of the crisis. Internationally, Shirley reports on Paris, where mass migration and immigrant-run scams have overwhelmed sections of the city, pushing out native residents and straining social cohesion. He critiques how local liberals support open migration policies despite rising crime and displacement concerns. In El Salvador, Shirley gained rare access to prisons housing MS-13 gang members, describing the bleak, dehumanizing conditions and the country's efforts to curb gang violence. which sharply contrasts with more permissive attitudes he sees abroad. His travels reveal the intersection of migration, crime, and political power, including examples like London, where Muslims hold significant influence and enforce community voting blocs. Reflecting socio-political dynamics, he connects to patterns emerging in Minnesota and other areas in the U.S. The podcast touches on the political consequences of Shirley's exposé. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's decision to not seek re-election was seen as a direct response to the mounting public pressure generated by the viral video. Shirley argues that fraud related to child care and Medicaid is a symptom of wider governance failures, including corrupt judges who overturn convictions and officials who ignore fraud statutes. The episode emphasizes the need for thorough investigations backed by airtight evidence to prevent fraudsters from escaping justice. Shirley stresses that beyond Walz, many others within the Department of Human Services and beyond should be held accountable to restore trust and financial integrity to public programs. Throughout the conversation, Shirley laments the disconnect between traditional media and younger generations, particularly Gen Z, who increasingly rely on independent content creators for news and truth. He praises platforms like X that allow creators to circumvent editorial gatekeepers and strike vocal, uncensored conversations directly with viewers. Shirley believes that legacy media's attacks on him via labeling and dismissiveness only hasten their own irrelevance as young audiences demand transparency, authenticity, and facts, not punditry. The co-host and Shirley speculate that the baby boomer generation's attachment to established media will fade with time, leaving room for new voices and approaches. In response to questions about his drive, Shirley cites frustration with unchecked corruption and the suffering it causes ordinary Americans. Seeing clear examples of fraud and systemic failure compelled him to act and be relentless, even at personal risk. He acknowledges having 24/7 security due to the dangers tied to his reporting, but stresses the necessity of his work. Looking ahead, Shirley plans to continue investigating fraud and corruption in other states and even internationally. He sees himself as part journalist, part activist, committed to exposing inconvenient truths that powerful interests prefer hidden. His goal is to inspire others to seek facts, pursue truth, and stand up against deceit regardless of media or political pressure. A significant theme is how Shirley and figures like Nick Fuentes resonate with younger, especially Gen Z, audiences craving unfiltered, straightforward information. Shirley notes that many young people face economic and social obstacles that create distrust towards establishment media and politicians. They gravitate toward bold voices willing to challenge narratives and expose hidden realities, even if those voices present differing viewpoints. On politics, Shirley supports Donald Trump while not wholly endorsing every action, appreciating Trump's approach on issues like immigration and drug enforcement compared to alternative leaders. He advocates for evaluating policies and initiatives rather than strictly party lines or personalities. Shirley shares frustrated attempts to confront politicians like Tim Walz for answers and suggests interest in interviewing figures such as Nayib Kelly from El Salvador and Democratic Congressman John Fetterman, viewing them as representatives of diverse political perspectives. He also expresses curiosity about exploring election interference rumors involving Venezuela. Host Shawn Ryan gives Shirley a Sig Sauer P365 Legion pistol for protection, acknowledging the risks involved in frontline investigative journalism. They also discuss Shirley's merchandise, including hoodies supporting his work, and promote Ryan's Patreon community, where listeners can interact and ask guests questions. Shirley touches on social challenges, including rising property taxes in Minnesota, laws restricting disclosure of certain daycare facilities, and racial and cultural tensions arising from demographic shifts in cities. He critiques policies that prioritize political expediency over the welfare of local communities and calls for greater honesty and enforcement. The episode emphasizes the power of modern social media platforms, especially X, in circumventing traditional gatekeepers and amplifying independent journalists like Shirley. Elon Musk's retweets and interactions with Shirley's content significantly boosted visibility. This dynamic contrasts with legacy media's reliance on hierarchical approval processes that often restrict timely, hard-hitting reporting. Shirley candidly acknowledges personal and family safety threats resulting from his exposés, including harassment, doxing, and physical altercations. Despite being only 23, he operates with professional security detail and feels the burden of being targeted by well-funded interests threatened by his revelations. Finally, Shirley's street-level interviews with addicts, migrants, and everyday Americans provide a human dimension often missing from mainstream narratives. He describes conversations that reveal the complex realities behind headlines, stories of hope, despair, crime, and resilience that illuminate systemic failures and inspire continued investigation.